Hello there guys, and welcome back to a brand new video. Following the Battlefield 2042 beta a couple of weeks ago, I was asked if I could make a video talking about what Battlefront 3 could be like if DICE were to make it within the next few years. There are a ton of different ideas out there already about what could potentially go into the game, and my personal favourite is definitely a space to ground game mode with a ton of players. I've probably done a video very similar to this one in the past, but now that 2042 has had some playtime across the world, I think now is the perfect time to revisit the idea. For those who know very little about Battlefield 2042, I'll run through it very quickly for you. It releases on November 19th or the 12th if you have early access, and in total the game has 3 core experiences. They are All Out Warfare, Portal and Hazard Zone. All Out Warfare is your typical Battlefield conquest and breakthrough modes on the 7 maps that the game has, where you have 2 teams of 64 players fighting it out for the win, so there is a total of 128 players on maps that are insanely large. Portal takes content from a bunch of previous Battlefield titles as well as 2042, and it allows you to essentially create any game mode that you can think of using this logic editor. You quite literally have creative freedom with what you create, and other people from across the world can play your game mode. I definitely haven't given it justice, but we'll have to wait until the game actually releases for everyone to try it out for themselves. Hazard Zone was released last week, and it's a mode where you and your squad can select your loadout, drop into the map and try to recover as many data drives as possible, all whilst other squads are aiming to do the same. On current gen consoles and PCs, the player count is up to 32 players, and on previous gen consoles it's 24. Once you get the data drives, you can then extract, and that will then earn you points. Hazard Zone isn't a mode about killing the enemy teams, it's purely about extracting those data drives, but if you do end up in a gunfight, be sure to take out as many opponents as you can, as when you die you're out until your team can respawn you by finding a redeploy beacon. So they're the main Battlefield experiences, and I think Battlefront 3 could very easily piggyback off it. By that I mean take inspiration from Battlefield and take it into Battlefront 3, for example Portal. Portal is a crazy Battlefield experience like no other, where you can have all of this content playable from older games, but with the 2042 characters and weapons, or 2042 content playable as World War II soldiers with Battlefront 3 vehicles. For Battlefront, the Portal side of things would allow you to have things like clone troopers versus stormtroopers on Jakku, or the First Order versus the Separatists on the Death Star, or you can just do whatever other crazy mashups that you can imagine. You could even have it where it's Galactic Assault, but you can only play as heroes. The possibilities created by the Portal experience are truly endless, so introducing it into a Battlefront game could be absolutely huge for the future of the franchise. In terms of what content they'd have, they'd mostly need to consider maps, as weapons, vehicles and more would likely already be in Battlefront 3 anyway. So the games they could essentially remaster maps from are all the previous Battlefront titles, including the PSP games like Elite Squadron and Renegade Squadron, and the original Battlefront 1 and 2, providing that they obviously get permission to do so. I think this would provide a huge sense of nostalgia for all long-term Battlefront fans, as well as providing all fans with a never-before-seen experience to the franchise. As well as the whole Portal experience that the game could have, I'd at least want to have a few different game modes for the main multiplayer experience, one being a large-scale space-to-ground mode, which I've probably spoken about so many times over the years, with at least 100 players. Battlefront always seems to have a smaller player count than Battlefield, likely due to the maps being smaller and therefore not being able to fit as many players on, so if DICE made a smaller map for Battlefront but included the space element to it, then I think it could be an amazing experience for players, and if they were able to have 128 players then that would be amazing, but as long as the mode itself actually feels super large scale and non-linear, then I'm fine with whatever the player count is. Whilst I'm not a huge fan of having AI in multiplayer modes, if they were to make it feel a bit bigger then I'd be up for that as well. Other modes I'd like to see consist of the typical heroes versus villains, Blast and hopefully Galactic Assault, as well as maybe some Starfighter modes as well. But having those 4 modes that I specifically mentioned just now I think would cater to a ton of different players and would certainly keep me engaged for a long time to come. So we'd ideally have a few multiplayer modes, including a large scale space to ground experience and Portal, very much like the Battlefield Portal but in Battlefront. Now what I'd also like to see on top of this is Galactic Conquest. Galactic Conquest couldn't really work that well online, but it would be an amazing single player experience that I know a huge amount of players would really appreciate. I think it could easily work exactly how it does in the original Battlefront 2, but the beauty of having it remastered on a ton of old maps is that you could also have more diversity when playing Galactic Conquest itself. For example, let's say you're the clones and you go to fight the Separatists on Naboo, then you could fight on the Battlefront 2 2017 map, but the next time you play Naboo you could play the original Naboo map from 2005. The same goes for any other planets that have multiple maps like Endor or Tatooine for example. Ultimately, what I want out of a Battlefront 3 is a large scale game that gives us players a lot of choice as to what we play and how we want want to play it. Battlefield 2042 is a really good example of what Battlefront 3 could be like, and I really hope DICE eventually goes on to make it, as there really is just so much potential for it, especially with all of these Star Wars TV shows and films coming out over the next few years. So guys, that is what I'd like to see from Battlefront 3 should we ever be blessed by its presence. Let me know in the comments what you'd like to see from a third installment of the Battlefront franchise, and be sure to subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Thank you all very much for watching, and may the force be with you always.